Hey everyone, thanks for dropping by for this next installment of The Sampleist. My name's Greg, and today we're taking a look at the latest release from Fracture Sounds, Moonlight Celeste. Fracture Sounds has been building a well-deserved reputation for creating beautiful instruments, capturing great playability with exceptional recording quality that sets them apart from many a developer. Moonlight Celeste is a welcome addition to a classic orchestral instrument that's had quite a renaissance over the last few years with the rise of fantasy-based films such as the much-loved John Williams score in the Harry Potter series. Moonlight Celeste has been captured in a large concert hall with multiple microphone options, atmosphere layers, and additional tools to help sculpt the sound for both orchestral and contemporary performances. It comes with 11 presets, 3 atmospheric layers, close, mid and far microphone signals, 9 round robins, and has full NKS support. And yes, it is compatible with the free Contact Player version 6.7 or later. It downloads onto your disc at 12 gigabytes. It's currently on intro sale at just $39, down from its normal $59, but only until April 25, so grab it while you can. Before we jump into today's video, be sure to hang around towards the end where I'll show you a composition I wrote using Moonlight Celeste, and I'll walk you through the composition process. Okay, so let's do this. Let's fire up Fracture Sounds Moonlight Celeste. And here is Fracture Sounds Moonlight Celeste. So before I give you a walkthrough on the layout of the user interface, let's have a quick listen straight out of the box with the default patch called a well-balanced Celeste. Now, I really hung on to that last note there because I think that's really where Moonlight Celeste really shines in this bit, is the resonance when you hold down each of the notes. So just starting out, obviously, with your foot off the sustain pedal. So what I was using there was a sustain pedal which controls traditionally CC64, which is the sustain pedal. Lovely clear crystal sound, but if I hang on to each of the notes, they will resonate for an eternity. Really gorgeous stuff. The clarity of these samples is just gorgeous. Okay, so let's have a quick look around the user interface. Now, if you're familiar with Fracture Sounds' other products, you will recognize this layout. Very clean, very succinct. Over here in the main section of the panel, we have a color, which is like an EQ, an attack that obviously gives you controls the attack on the sample from a very sharp percussive at the start to a longer attack there. The release, obviously, of the sample can be increased. There's the release trigger. And the atmosphere intensity. Those resonant atmospheres after it. There is the key noise, so if you like that kind of sound of hearing the wooden hammers at really high levels. But without it, it's a little bit, it's quite nice. They've got a music box layer to give that like a toy piano sound to it, aesthetic over the top of it, so without it. And all the way. Nice. And they've also got a feature like a lo-fi, so a conventional nice warm sound, or you can dial it right up to have a lo-fi sound. Like playing down a telephone line, isn't it? In which you can control the saturation, the age, and the warble. So make it sound a little older, some more saturation, a bit of hiss. Now you'll have to listen quite closely. There's the hiss, so we can dial that up, and the mechanical sounds, mechanical noise. And you can have like a boombox or a 12-inch speaker or a horn, or as we originally had, like a telephone. So there's some lovely features there to help you sculpture the sound. I'm just going to pull it back for now. The final two features on this page here, the room tone. So what the boys at Fracture Sounds have done, they've baked in some sounds of the room itself. So you get that more sort of ambience of the sound, not a reverb, but if you have a listen, at the moment it's turned off. But again, if you listen very closely, I don't know if you can detect that, but there's an ever-present hum, if you will, of the room as if the mic's been left on. Adding a little more colour to the room if you would like. And obviously you can change the reverb, dial up and down, and you can choose from a range of different reverb types and the dampening, the modulation, fade in and size, etc. Moving across to the right-hand panel, there's the combination of the different layer mixes and some microphone mixes. So first of all, the layer mixes is kind of where the real natural colour of this instrument comes to light. So on the left-hand side is the raw selection. So this is how you control the volume of the overall raw Celeste samples. So what I'm going to do is I'll show you what I mean. Let's just turn off each of these other atmospheres for the moment. So what you're hearing there is all raw Celeste. Should also point out the lovely, really sort of different round robins and also the different velocities. So very soft velocity to a much heavier. Quite a dynamic range there. It's really, really nice, very deep. Cool. So I can pull that down now. This is where the other features come into it. So each of the Mystic, Rites and Loon are like different atmospheres. So again, I'm going to turn off the other three, meaning the raw samples, and just leaving the Mystic. Now you will have to listen. I'll turn it up just a tad. So it's very soft atmosphere that when you add it with the raw, that's the long resonant sound that I was speaking of before when you hold down the note. Add in the Rites and the Loon. So you can draw these right down if you want next to no sample sounds and just have all atmospheres. Almost song-like. Dare I say it, almost like a human voice? Let's bring the raw samples back in. Gorgeous stuff, really, really nicely. And finally, the mic mix, very classic, close, mid and far. I'm sure that's quite self-explanatory. You can turn them off and solo as you like. So you can change how close it is to maybe a little bit further away to your heart's desires. And down the very bottom, is a perspective slider that allows you to basically dial in a simple way close or a far mix. So the far mix might sound like, versus something that's really close, right next to your ear. Now, I'm going to turn off the room tone. Let's go over to the far left panel where on the main page you can control the response settings, so you can change the response curve of your keyboard to the different timbre. And even the volume scaling, so you can even drag it from here, and how responsive your keyboard is to your velocity of playing. So if you have a light touch on your keyboard, you can dial it down. If you want a more percussive sound, dial it up. And then finally in the settings, you can control the sample start. So this has got a latency built into it that allows you to set the setting here. And if the latency is 25 milliseconds, if you dial it down, you'll get a more realistic sound. But the latency is a lot higher to get that realism. But that value there, I'm told, allows you to actually set that value in your track negative delay. So in your track that you've got Moonlight Celeste attached to, you can set the negative delay to the equivalent of the value you've set here, and that should take into account the latency. A clarity filter, this one sort of reduces, as the name says here, the description rather, that reduces the low frequencies on the higher notes. So if you get a clarity filter and you're right at the very top, without it, you can probably get sometimes a lower frequency knock. Again, you might have to listen very closely. But in the headphones I'm wearing, I can hear it quite distinctly, and you can filter out those low frequencies. You can also extend the range. So with the button off and bringing your attention to the keyboard down below, the lowest note is a low C here. I think it's about C4 perhaps. But you can extend that range down by turning on. So this means that these notes have been stretched across this keyboard to quite a very low C, a couple of octaves down below. So you will lack a little bit of realism because, as Fracture Sounds declares, that these are actually stretched across the keyboard. They're not a part of the natural instrument that it was sampled from. The room tone and noise mode. So if you refer back here when we spoke earlier, we had a look at the room tone with the room noise. You can actually have that always on, as is currently the case, or you can set it to host transport, which means that you're only going to hear that sound if your host transport is in play mode, and it will stop when you hit stop. And the atmosphere decay mode means that when you hold on to the note, they will sustain infinitely. You can hear the sustaining note as we speak, or you can set it so it actually decays naturally. So when I hold down my note, it's not going to sustain forever, it'll naturally decay away. So there you go, some really, really rich settings to take what is essentially quite a simple instrument in the Celeste and bring it into the 21st century with some lovely shaping tools. Okay, so let's not labour too long because Fracture Sounds themselves have got a great introductory video which covers much of what I've said here. Another really big tick, and a congratulations to Fracture Sounds for doing this, they've actually included a user manual where many a developer these days don't even bother to tell you how to use their instrument and you have to work it out by trial and error. Congratulations Fracture Sounds for providing a well-written, well-laid out user manual. So you should never have to worry about understanding what each of these features are, even despite the fact that most of these features are relatively self-explanatory. I applaud them for actually creating a user manual, which is a pet hate of mine I see in other developers where they don't even bother. And that's for products I've seen that are far more sophisticated in terms of number of features available. But hey, as I say with Fracture Sound stuff, there's beauty in simplicity, and congratulations on writing that user manual. So as I said earlier, Moonlight Celeste is like a crossover. You've got the classic Celeste sound from an orchestral Celeste in its native natural form. And you've also can use the different atmospheres and the layers, as we explored earlier, to give it a more contemporary feel that might be more fitting in a film score composition. And to help you explain this or help you understand this, we've got a set of different presets. So I'm going to just select a couple at random. Now, I am going to apologize in advance. I am not the world's greatest keyboard player, and I'm certainly not a Celeste player at all. So let's pick a few of these, and hopefully you'll get a sound or an understanding where the distinction between some of them sound almost pad-like and some of them are much like a traditional Celeste. So let's have a listen. Among Clouds. I will add here, I'm a big fan of using the sustain pedal because otherwise you get more of a staccato sound. But holding down the sustain pedal allows those notes to ring through, so be sure to use that. Let's have a listen to Comet Tails. Very distant, very anthemic, ambient, dare I say it. Let's try Light Years Away. So I can see they've taken advantage of the lo-fi feature in this particular preset. The colors dialed back on the EQ, next to no attack and release, and moderate intensity. We've got some key noise in there as well. And the music layer box is also brought in. But notice how over here it's all raw samples. There's none of the atmospheric layers involved in that one. Lovely. Pale Blue Dot. Now quite the opposite. Lots of Mystic, Rites and Loon and the layers, and lots of raw. Very long on the attack, very long on the release. So giving a more pad-like quality. Nice, very nice. And maybe finally, Voyage dans la Lune. There's that angelic choir sound. Really like that. So there you go. I think that's a walkthrough of the instrument itself. We've explored all the different sounds and the colors that you can get from the main page. You can set up your response settings. You can control the way the samples are started and the room noise and the room tone. There's some lovely, lovely tools here that really takes the Celeste from its classic sound all the way up to almost a pad-like sound with all the different layers. And I love sitting on those layers with my sustain pedal and just slowly falling through the different chords as they come out in your hands. It's really nice. So I can pick up my hands off the keyboard because I've got my sustain pedal deployed. Move to the next one. But there's always that classic, beautiful Celeste sound that would not go out of colour. It would be just perfect in an orchestral setting. Gorgeous. All right, so I'm now going to show you a quick composition I use with Moonlight Celeste. I'll walk you through that process and some of the composition techniques and the analysis I did and how I came to it. And then on the other side of it, I'm going to wrap up today's video and give you my final thoughts on this amazing instrument. Okay, so let's jump in and have a look at the composition. Where did I want to start? I wanted to start with something like with a bit of tension, if you like. So there's something about the Celeste. It's a remarkably beautiful instrument, very melodic, celestial, hence the name, as we said earlier. But I thought, wouldn't it be nice to put it in a context where there was tension, like a small child's toy in a horror setting? Not quite horror, but something where it shouldn't really be, something where there's this tension that's waiting to break. So in order to do that, there's nothing like a good drone. So I started with some violins and a couple of coloured violins. Just sitting on a couple of C notes. And they sit there for the whole thing. Another octave down. Just creating that air of tension. And then it was time to get out the Celeste. So in looking at that, I chose a setting that was a little bit of colour, slightly pulling back on the attack, a moderate amount of release. The atmosphere intensity will modulate according to the mod wheel, And the layer mix was pulling back on the raw samples, but upping on the other layers, being the Mystic Rites and Loon, and maybe the music layer box coming there into some character. So with that, I then simply just used a sustain pedal. So what I'm going to do here, let's have a look at the automation. And so what you'll notice here, sustain being CC64, I'm effectively holding it and just dropping it where I'm changing the chords. Now the chords are nothing other than a C and a G in the left hand. Now if I hold down those chords, the samples really resonate and evolve, giving a very ambient sound. Almost pad-like, isn't it? So if we have a look at that one, we'll put the drones back on. And they really hold out to create some more tension. And the final piece of this part of it was to let's bring in some choirs. So some sopranos. And if you listen closely, there's some clashes. So I chose a patch. That had a little bit of dissonance in there, some minor seconds clashing with each other. Building up a bit of intensity. And moving into a transition for the second piece, which, as you can hear, still holding the sustain on the celeste. So I've brought in a tremolo. And so what I've decided to do here, let's just turn off that. So the second part, building on the first part, has some sort of creepy chord sequence, some C sus minor, G sharp diminished, with a B flat minor and A minor. And so it centers around this simple piano piece. I've just used a somewhat tape-driven sort of piano sound, a little bit of creepiness. And then it repeats. Cool. So having done that, thought a Celeste might be something like an arpeggio, if you like a small child's toy. So we get, oops, beg your pardon, wrong one. Moving through the triads of each of the chords in triplets. A little bit of intensity. And then to repeat. And then adding this bit here was some little twinkly bits. Well, what else would you call them? Slight glissandi, perhaps? Just played them in. And before we finish, why don't we add a little bit of percussive tension with some col legno. So again, for those who aren't familiar, col legno is when the string players use the back of their bow to strike the strings, giving it a quite percussive sound. So what you end up with, if we go back to the start, there's our tremolo. And at the same time, There's our percussive coleños. And then the coleños double up with some octaves. And then some long, soft strings. With the tremolo holding that tension. So there you go. There's our walkthrough of the piece. A little bit of tension, some interesting chords with some G sharp diminishes and some C minors and B flat minors to create some tension, and then letting the Celeste move its melodic flavour through with some arpeggios and some glissandi. And I hope you enjoyed all that. So let's move on now and I'll give you some final thoughts and we'll wrap up today's video. Fracture Sounds has continued to build its portfolio of gorgeous instruments with Moonlight Celeste. And the quality of this instrument is definitely on par with the quality we've come to expect from Fracture Sounds. A Celeste is essentially a simple hammered chime instrument, and Fractured Sounds recognises that a simple instrument has to be respected when it comes to creating a virtual version of it. You must faithfully reproduce the natural feel of the original instrument and then add colours that extends the instrument while still honouring its musical essence. And at the end of the day, the quality of the samples is what makes this instrument as good as it is. Fracture Sounds once again has shown restraint by not overloading the instrument with every conceivable sound manipulation tool in the universe. Had they done so, it would have detracted from the essence I spoke of earlier. Moonlight Celeste sits handsomely alongside its other Fracture Sound cousins in the growing catalogue of sonically impressive instruments. Even at its normal retail price of $59, much less its current intro price of $39, Moonlight Celeste is a beautifully crafted addition to the film score composer's set of must-have instruments. And with that, my final act today is to say thank you to you for stopping by and taking a look at Fracture Sounds' Moonlight Celeste. On the way out, you can help the channel by giving it a like and sharing the love with other musicians just like you and me. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell and you'll be fully armed to be at the forefront of the latest news and reviews from the world of virtual instruments. This is Greg Revell signing off for the Sampleist team, and as always, wishing you all the best on your journey to find your sounds and find your soul. See you on the next one.